everyone. Welcome to the Aurora Public Library. I'm Elizabeth.
I'm Stacy.
I'm Brandon.
And this is Pop Culture Done. Today we're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. It came out earlier this year. It is a remake, as the name implies, of a game from 1997. And what is everybody's experiences with the game?
So I started Final Fantasy VII way back in high school, and I thought I played a lot of it, but I ended up only playing like 30 minutes of it. And the rest of my knowledge of Final Fantasy VII is rooted in Kingdom Hearts and Advent Children. Though I've mostly forgotten most of that too now.
So my experience with Final Fantasy VII is I did indeed grow up with it. I was one of the millions of people who it was their first time experiencing a 3D RPG, a JRPG to be specific, with this huge engrossing story. So I have a strong connection with it. And another cool thing about this, and considering we all work in libraries, Final Fantasy VII was actually one of the first games to really make me want to learn, basically learn to read better and to read more and more, because it was such a text-heavy game. So it's largely responsible for my love of reading as well.
Oh, that is so cool. And that's your background too right now, right? Behind you?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, this side, we have Cloud here, one of the main protagonists of Final Fantasy VII, staring up at Shinra. And yeah, my favorite spiky-haired boy.
The best spiky-haired boy, honestly. I understand there might be controversy, but the best. Okay, so like you, one of my first games I ever played, the first game, because Spyro was too scary. There were those sheep, and they ran at you really fast. And that was scary, but then I saw my older brother playing this game that had like hellhounds and experimentation and explosions and bombs and monsters from space, and I was like, that game looks amazing and not scary at all. Give it to me. For Final Fantasy VII Remake, the star of the show is spiky-haired boy Cloud Strife, right? Right. And he has joined a terrorist organization to blow up a bunch of reactors.
Eco-terrorists, to be specific.
Eco-terrorists, to be specific. They're blowing up reactors because they're killing the planet. Meanwhile, he's got these lovely, charming visions in his head of a tall man with silver hair and a very, very long sword, who is ominous and surrounded by fire. Do either of you want to add to the summary?
Just as a general plot summary, is that, as you know, this game is called Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it's a remake of, the older title, obviously. So those flashes and visions of our tall, silver-haired fellow there, that's actually slightly different than the way the original game presented those first portions. So it's interesting. Very interesting.
We should talk about the different world building in this game, because we're all coming from, even if you only played 30 minutes, Stacy, we're all coming from a game where the characters were this big.
I do remember what the game looks like.
They look like Legos.
Do not forget
little pixel Lego protagonists walking around with their nice big swords. And we're coming from a game that had if you hear remake, you think it's going to be a similar story, but it was different, and they added material, a lot of material. So let's talk about some of the material that got added. Because, oh my gosh, I understand that Midgar is a dystopian hellscape, but I want to just crawl into my screen and live there for just a little while.
Ooh, you are, so you're talking world building and the things they added. So one thing I have to say that I feel is one of the most vital and greatest additions they made to this game is literally just because of the modern graphics and the new perspective, because we always kind of had the top-down perspective from the old game. What I think is so amazing is in the Midgar slums, you truly feel the oppression and the people trying to keep hope, because what you couldn't do in the original game is you can now look up. You are walking on the ground level, and you see the plates above you. You see the plates blocking the sky, and I feel that the perspective of the game, like the literal camera angle, lets you feel so much more immersed in kind of the oppressive feeling that those people feel in the slums and their situation.
Oh, it's so true, because the city, it's laid out like a triple layer pizza, right? So you've got like the top layer where the rich people live and they can afford sunlight. And then you've got like the middle class people who can afford sunlight, some sunlight. And then you've got like all the way down to the slums where they cannot afford any sunlight at all. Do I have that right? Do I have the right number of layers there? Our heroes are stuck in the one where you cannot even pay for the sun. You're just stuck with like lamps, and it was so sad. I looked up and there was just these little holes in the metal, and I was just sad that you just basically live in this tiny little metal box with lights.
Yep, and it just brings more. I think it brings more conflict to the whole eco-terrorism. And by the way, the terrorist group that Cloud and the protagonist are for is called Avalanche. And
Yes.
the interesting thing about it is in the original game, it's just, you kind of just think Avalanche good guys, Shinra bad, clear as day. But now you kind of can get the other perspective because you see these people who are dependent on this energy, this Mako, and they lose their Mako. Those people in the slums, they lose what little light, electricity, and power they have. So it's like, oh, I kind of get it now. Like I kind of see the
Yeah.
shades of gray here.
I don't know, because the whole time you're like, I'm doing this right thing, and then you get down and everyone is devastated and has lost everything, and I'm like, oh. Or like,
As a newcomer, Stacy, how hard was it for you to see, without me going into spoilers, me kind of talking vaguely here, how hard was it for you to see the main characters kind of feel regret over that very first decision they make and the repercussions that Elizabeth's referring to? Jessie was very conflicted over her part she played and how big things played out. And what'd you think of that, seeing your protagonist not being sure of what they did? They weren't absolutely confident they're doing the right thing. Like, you got to see this moment of doubt. What was that like for you as a newbie?
I mean, I don't know if as a newbie, but like just like as an empathetic person, it was really great to see the characters struggle with me. Like, you do the thing, stuff happens, and you're like, was that worth it? Like, I'm not entirely sure. And then to watch them struggle and talk to each other about their struggles, especially, I don't think it's a spoiler, especially Tifa. Tifa, just also because she's like my favorite character in this game. Her talking about it always like gave me chills. Felt a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Did it feel different for you guys? Because I feel like for me it feels less of a like a newcomer experience. It comes from like an empathetic experience. So I don't know, is it different when you already have experience?
It was interesting to me to see how the narrative was changed. Not just the story's narrative, but the story within the story. So in the original game, of course, it doesn't dwell so long on the consequences in the city afterwards. It also doesn't show it's not their bomb that causes the devastation. It partially is, but it's
but they don't know that.
They don't know that. They think it's their bomb that caused that devastation, and it's breaking their hearts. And it's being portrayed by the media that it is their bomb that caused that devastation, and that everyone should be afraid of this terrorist organization that's willing to trample the common people to achieve its goals. When in fact, it wasn't them. It was their bomb did exactly as intended and blew up only the command device for the reactor. And then the Shinra Corporation, who owns that reactor and owns the city itself and is in control of how they're perceived, blows up the reactor itself and destroys the city and blames it on them and makes them blame it on themselves. That was interesting.
I really liked the media clips just because you play the game and then you see how the media twists it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that's not what we did. You were lying and you were making me look worse.
Right. And that's, that's amazing world building to see the people in the town gathering around, seeing these news clips being presented to them, and you knowing the opposite. One last thing I'll say on this subject, and since we're talking about this, I think it's safe content again. The interesting thing is I wish they kind of met in the middle here, because in the original game, it was completely Avalanche. Shinra did not blow up their own reactor. They changed that for this. What I would have preferred in the middle is if they, if it was a larger explosion that causes damage. But I think I would have preferred it if it was completely Avalanche again. I'm glad that Avalanche didn't find out.
Stacy says no. Stacy says no way.
I have things to say when you're finished.
I'm glad that it wasn't originally. I'm glad that they didn't find out originally. It was Shinra. I'm glad they thought it was them, so we got to see them go through that pain of regretting their action, because I like to see that. But for us as the players of the game, I felt like it just gave us too much of an easy out. Like, okay, Shinra is clearly bad. like I myself would have liked to doubt it more and be like, oh man, maybe they went too far with what they did here. I thought it just kind of was too easy of a, they're clearly bad, they blew up their own factory. I think I would have liked a bit more conflict for me. I know the characters are conflicted, but you know, we can play meta. We know what's actually happening. I think I would have liked more conflict myself.
I think I get what you're saying. I think that, I don't know, the whole like Shinra was the person. I didn't play the demo, so everything in the first hour was new to me. That blew my mind. I was like, what? Why? So I disagree. I liked that they did that, and I didn't know that they didn't do that in the first game because, like I said, I didn't make it very far. But I don't know, maybe that middle ground could have been like waiting. Like maybe the first time something happens that's like big, you're like, oh, it was them. And then like the second time something big happens, they're like,
that I would have been also happy if they just revealed later, like to us.
yeah, like not like
yeah.
to the characters, but like we could be like, oh.
Yeah.
Instead of
I would have
learning it right away, but still as a newcomer, I was not ready.
That's
cool.
fair.
And I was devastated.
One of the most famous songs in the Final Fantasy VII broader series universe, not this particular game, is called The Price of Freedom. Yeah, I knew you'd like that, Brandon. And so that's why I was hoping that this would emphasize the shades of gray. I think there's a really great scene later on in the game. All I'm going to say is lamps. There's a really great scene later on in the game where I started to question, well, am I doing the right thing here or not? Because I think a question that the world asks is, okay, how much are we willing to pay to get that freedom that we were needing in the first place? How much, what's the proper cost? And that comes up increasingly as the game goes on, which is interesting to me. So yeah, at first, Brandon, I was on your boat when you were talking, where I was like, oh yes, they should have made it more ambiguous. But then you said it, Stacy, and I'm like, oh yes, if I'd come in not knowing that Shinra were the worst people in the world, would I have actually wanted that more clear construction of the narrative? It wouldn't. Would I have wanted to see the mwahaha from the Shinra? So maybe both. Both is good. So
both is good.
Both is good. But yes, that's the reactors. So we're still walking through, but let's talk about some other world building in this. Let's talk about, you mentioned Tifa, Stacy. Let's talk about Sector 7 and Tifa, and Sector 5 and Aerith, because these are the main places we're hanging out, right? We hang out in Sector 6 a little. There's some traveling in between, but there's two main areas of the game where we spend most of the time in the early acts, and that's Sector 7 and 5. So let's talk about them, because I love them. I want to buy my landlady cookies, and that's not a thing that I do in real life.
I like Tifa in Sector 7.
Yes, we can combine this with characters. Yes, Tifa is marvelous.
Well, like also like with the world building, like I kind of knew a little bit about Tifa because I'd watched Final Fantasy Advent Children, and I had played Kingdom Hearts, which of course screws everything up all the time on keeping it accurate to the source material. I think I haven't played a lot of Final Fantasies, maybe not. But I knew Tifa had a bar, and that was like pretty much all I knew. I was like, she's got a bar, she's friends with Barrett, and there's a child somewhere. And I don't know when the child comes in, but the child is always here. But so exploring and seeing the bar finally, and like walking in, and everyone like goes somewhere else, and you're kind of just, you get this moment where you just explore the bar. The game just has you kind of walk around, check out the jukebox, check out the darts, check out everything. And I don't know, it was just really, it was fun. And of course, that's one section of Section 7, so.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. For me, I wish I had a screenshot here to show you all, but right now I think I'm actually at 110 hours of gameplay time in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And, you know, I got every trophy and everything. And now it's to the point where I'll just put the game on in the background and let the NPCs walk by. If you actually really just stop and just listen to all the dialogue that the NPCs have each other, it's phenomenal. The little things that are happening that because of modern technology that we can have, having the stray cats run through the alleys, seeing the smoke rise from some of the homes, hearing the hum of electricity, it's just amazing. And like so many times going through sector, the different sectors, I found myself just kind of walling up with tears because it's how I remembered as a kid, and to see it come to life and match up with like the memory I have, it's absolutely amazing. And yeah, it's just honestly, and I think this is with no Final Fantasy bias, just like as a gamer who respects well-made games, it has to be one of the best environments I've seen in the game as far as how much is going on and just how real and lived in it seems. If I feel like when I turn off my PlayStation, I feel like those characters are still living and doing their thing when the game is off. And that is like the greatest compliment I can give to a world.
I'd agree with that, I think. I haven't had it going on in the background, and now I really want to, by the way, because that just sounds like it would be lovely. But the architecture nerd in me wants to sit down and just look at the way these spaces were constructed to sort of how they built them. Sector 7, a lot of it looks like it's built from scrap metal and cardboard and a lot of just detritus. So when you are moving through there, there's like pretty narrow streets. You've had it on, you would know better than I do what it's made of. But it's interesting, like everything, there's so much detail. There's the holes in the sky, like we were talking about before. There's the bar, which is cozy and feels welcoming, even in this atmosphere where everything's kind of made out of scrap. Which is nice because that's where you're meeting your childhood friend Tifa. So it's supposed to be kind of comforting and also disorienting. Cats. I like the stray cats. I want a mini game where I save the stray cats.
I was so happy. That was such a good start.
I cannot pet the cats. This is the disqualifying factor. There's that little Twitter that's like, can you pet the dog? I cannot pet the cats. I tried. This is consistent with Cloud's character because he is a spiky boy and they do not want to get pet by this standoffish dude with a big sword. And I respect that. But also, Cloud needs a cat. So, yes. And the fact that they established his character well enough that I want him to have a cat, and that they established the cats that I want them to have a Cloud, that's the world building right there in Sector 7. Also, the landlady I was referring to, there's a very cool little old lady with her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and you only have interactions with her that are just dialogue. I don't think she even has a quest for you. She just like gives you a place to stay and like tells you that you better not be mean to Tifa.
Treat Tifa good.
Tifa good, which everybody in the background, everybody playing the game just lifts their hands and applauds, right?
Like obviously.
But you have all these people like this. You've got like the random dudes who are running the show for the little guards standing at the gate outside of where all the monsters are. You've got the lady who tells off those guards for not taking care of the monsters, which is bravo to her. You've got just all these tiny little people who come in and leave and don't actually have a huge effect on the plot. Like, I don't even know if they all have names. The weird item shop guy who's just like, hey, and he's great. Hey, Tifa. And Cloud's like, no. And he's like, okay. Hey, Cloud. So.
I feel like we're thinking of different weird shop owners because there's a lot.
I
like
love the weird shop owners.
Lays down and he's like, you're here again.
Like, okay, he was in the original. He was in the original just like that.
Better.
Yes, he was.
He was.
Yes.
Still confusing and weird.
I think the moment that really got me though, there's a moment when you climb up from a church full of flowers to where you can see the whole city. Yeah. So you meet Aerith in the church. She's a flower girl, a very mysterious and quirky flower girl. Yes, there's Aerith, who we all love despite not wanting to love, perhaps, so much. Look, a lot of people went into this like, we're not going to love Aerith, but then we did. And it was sad. And I
don't think there's any way you cannot love Aerith.
I cried many tears.
Like her first, she's in like the very opening, and she's just like,
she gives you a
with her flowers, and I'm like, oh.
And then she ditches you.
No, yeah, then she ditches you.
When we get into characterization, I'm really gonna.
That's fair. Fair.
I gotta go in on her.
Okay. Yes, but there's the moment when you're looking down on the entire city, on sectors 7 and 6. That was a really cool moment.
I agree with that. Again, it's just you can really take the full world in, and you're like, wow, this is a real place.
We should move on to characterization now, though. I think talk characters. Tifa, Aerith, Cloud, Jessie, Biggs, Wedge, Barrett. What do we got?
So first of all, with the characters, I feel they hit the nail on the head with perfect translation from previous games to now. In fact, I would say better characterizations, to be completely and entirely honest. Cloud, Aerith, Tifa, I would say those three are the best they've ever been in a game. Maybe even any form of media. I think they're better than they were in Advent Children. One thing I really enjoy, just as I won't be able to, I can't concisely elaborate on them. I love them all. But just one thing I thought was very refreshing is in the original game, and they were always all portrayed as strong characters, but there was definitely this kind of let's rely on Cloud completely kind of thing going on. And now some of the things I like the little quips with Cloud saying like to Aerith, all right, make sure you stay behind me. And Aerith says, oh, right, so I can cover your back. And just them like with their big quip ups, when you have the one guy later in the game, make two guys, they're talking poorly about Aerith and they're saying things like, oh, she's pretty cute and like this, and she just looks like Cloud. Permission to kill. I just like this stronger attitude and standing up for themselves, and you feel like they can, handle themselves. Like they love Cloud, and Cloud's a good support, but they don't need Cloud, and I appreciated that.
I'll agree with that. Both Tifa and Aerith are crazy strong female characters. And Aerith is introduced as this like quiet, sad girl with her flowers, and then she's like real sassy and spunky when she jokes around with Cloud, and Cloud is like, jokes?
What's that joke too? These ones go after be careful, these ones go after weak enemies. Oh, okay, I'll look after you, it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree. They're great, and I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to like not fall in love with. I mean, all of the characters, but like Tifa and Aerith, like respectively.
Yeah, and I think Cloud now, again, with the ability to have better facial animations and better voice acting, no longer is Cloud just because a lot of people, the common thing for people who aren't too familiar with Final Fantasy is Cloud was always painted off as this kind of just moody, always depressing character, like not that much growth. But now to me, Cloud comes off more somebody who's been through terrible things in his life, and now he's reserved, and I don't want to open up to anybody. I don't want to show affection, and I don't want to feel affection, because once I love something, I'm attached to something, it can be taken away from me. And I get that, with his character. I was like, yep, you're just guarding yourself. I understand.
Yeah, the original game without the voice acting left a lot of ambiguity in why Cloud is, and left him as more of a jerk, and this one definitely has it more guarded. There's that sense of care. And then Tifa and Aerith both have a lot of interiority. They both have things they don't tell Cloud, which is interesting because we get to see them as characters, which isn't something, it's much harder to do that in the previous JRPG. You can't express as much emotional nuance with Legos. But toward the end of the game, both Aerith and Tifa have some pretty big secrets that they're keeping, I think. Aerith definitely, Tifa a bit. And so that's very interesting to see. And then we have Barrett.
Yes, Barrett, Elizabeth, I'll let you start with that one. Go ahead and lead the way.
Okay. Barrett's one of my favorite characters, but they screwed up. They could have done a better job with Barrett. In 1997, Barrett was basically Mr. T transported into a sci-fi cyberpunk fantasy setting, which is great and fabulous, but also got some pushback because he was the only Black character in the entire game and was portrayed as, this is the meanest, scariest one of this entire terrorist organization. He's the guy with the gun who yells a lot. And I think they did a little better about that this time. Especially as the game continues, you get a lot more nuance with his character and a lot more interesting stuff going on there. But there's still those opening moments, like the first couple hours, I was just sitting there going, you guys didn't change Barrett at all, did ya? And that rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah,
what were your thoughts?
I completely agree with that sentiment right there. At the beginning of the game, they really play up the brashness and the loud, they're like just literally shouting as he shoots his arm gun, it's just, it gets excessive. But then, like you said, as the story progresses, I felt like they found their footing with Barrett, and I'm hoping that carries forward with future installments. But a few things that stuck out. Obviously, the father-daughter relationship is wonderful. That's where you see his tender side and caring. But the other ways where I think you see some of the well-done sides of Barrett are the way that his companions in Avalanche look up to him. You see him as this charismatic leader who can really captivate people with his speech. And some of his lines show his general care for his comrades. There's a certain part in the game where something really bad happens and he says, we need to go look for them. And then they say, okay, well, what if they're gone or things like that? And, you know, he says, we'll carry them. And they're like, well, what if they're gone? And he says, well, then we'll carry that too. And that line just stuck with me, that he respects these people so much that he wants to carry that pain. And like, I feel like you said, as the game progresses, you start getting that fleshing out. But the first impressions are important. If you lose people in that first part, they'll never know his full character.
Some of my favorite authors didn't play the game because they found the portrayal offensive, and I get that. I think he has the biggest heart of any of the cast. I think that's a really good thing you pointed out there, that he's the one who sort of guards the rest and looks out for them and takes care of them. And he's the one who's always calling out Cloud if he stops caring, and the one reminding Tifa that it's okay, that she's allowed to be angry or to feel whatever she feels. She can hold on to it. She doesn't have to give up caring. So both of those sides he's got, which is great. The main part that I got upset about, there's a certain scene where all of these terrorists are on the train, and the one that frightens the people on the train is specifically Barrett, which I don't like. But then again, I look out the window, maybe that's how it would go on a train now with a bunch of terrorists, where Barrett was the only one of the group, which sucks.
But you know what? You're right, though. You're absolutely right, because it shouldn't be, because let's look at that situation where it happened. Yeah, you have Barrett, this large fellow, a gun for an arm. At the same time, you have this guy walking by who has a sword as big as his body. I'm going to be equally as nervous about both of them, you know?
Ideally, yeah, you've got a lot of highly suspicious people on this train. There is no reason to just like zero in on Barrett. He is the wrong one to zero in on. He is the team dad. Leave him alone. We protect Barrett in this house. So yeah.
That's a good point, though, Elizabeth. That's very good. And I think that was a poor portrayal. I would like to think it was not done with malicious intent, but I feel it was a lapse in the game designer's judgment. But fans are making their voices heard, and I think course correction will come.
And to the game's credit, he's not the only Black character anymore. Stacy, you're doing a thing.
Yeah, I had something to say to that. I kind of thought, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, that scene was intentional. One, because of the, status of our country. But like
they're racist because we're racist. There we go.
So, Brandon said that they found their footing as he went on, but I disagree. I think they always had their footing with Barrett. I think they started Barrett as a character that you just don't really like. Like, he's kind of mean. You're kind of like, what's happening? Elizabeth clearly has something to say, but Barrett gets so good. Barrett has so much character development that I did not like Barrett at the beginning of the game, and I felt bad. I was like, I love everyone, but why am I not clicking with Barrett? And then you just like watch him, and the more that he responds to Cloud and they become closer, you learn more about him, and he just, by the end, I was like head over heels for Barrett. And like last chapter specifically, I was like, Barrett, like, you just became my favorite character with this one line. How did this happen?
It was so good. It really was.
I like Barrett. You both know that.
With what that's a very good point that Stacy brought up. I thought with, maybe that was the writers of the game's intention to portray it that way and then take us on this journey through this progression of Barrett, and then like it's revealed to us, his true character, just like it's revealed to the characters within the game. But I still feel like they probably could have handled that better, because I just have to play devil's advocate. If this many people out in the real world are having this criticism and not picking up on that, then in my opinion, that means it wasn't delivered well enough, and that something was lost in translation. So if that was their intention, cool, but I just don't think it was executed as well as it could have been.
Yeah, I'll agree to that.
I agree with that.
I do see where Barrett started, and I see where he ended, and I see the progression. But I agree it could have been better. It didn't have to be that way. Maybe it was intentional.
I'm really
Kind of.
curious to see what they do in the next game with Barrett. That will really play in a lot to how much I'm willing to give a pass or a slide on this one. And I guess that ties in a little bit to information about changes in this game in regards to plot points and specifically the ending.
Is this our
Hand
spoiler
waving?
warning then? Or is this our
Is this
hand wave?
a spoiler, 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 spoiler,
As the
spoiler?
newcomer, I'm like, do we start now?
We do, we start now. So this is spoilers not for the entire series, but for this game. Yes, this is our little spoiler dance. If you do not want spoilers, please leave, go away. We will beckon you back when we are done. Just put us on mute and keep watching our delightful faces babble at you, because we'll go back.
We'll do this when we're ready.
We'll do this, we'll give you a thumbs up. But yeah, that was not the real thumbs up. Spoiler time. Let's talk plot points changing in the ending. All right.
I don't know what changed because I didn't play the first one. So you guys take over.
No, but I am delighted. Brandon has lots of feelings about the changes. I'm delighted that you don't know what changed. So, can I ask you, what do you think about the ghosties who know the mosties?
I do not understand what is happening with that.
What is happening?
So confused. That means absolutely nothing, and every time they're on, I'm like, is this gonna get explained? And then they're like, no, and I'm like, okay.
So for those of
I don't
you,
know what changed. I don't know if they were in the first one, but it doesn't.
They were not.
Except that they are extremely hard to fight, and I get really, really frustrated.
That's fair. They were not in the first game. They were not in any previous game in the Final Fantasy series. So these lovely little ghosties. Basically what happens is that before you go to the second reactor in this game, there are some lovely shades. They have, what are their real names? Are they, I've been watching
Entry data not available. That's all my SS told me.
I thought they were called the Whispers of Fate.
I was going to say, I think they're called the Whispers.
Whispers.
So you get these whispers, and they're like, picture, your standard, like, creepy black cloak flying through the air kind of thing going on.
Dementor.
Dementor, difficult to defeat. And they keep showing up. And Brandon, let's talk about that.
Oh, so interesting, when they very first start appearing, and it's early on, I believe your first encounter is when you first meet Aerith, and then they start harassing Aerith. And that's fitting.
You can't see them at first. She can, and you can't. Yeah.
And then, you find out that maybe Aerith knows more than she's letting on. That, I can go down that rabbit hole for a while. We'll talk about that when we mention the ending specifically. But, so what it turns out is happening with these whispers that you find out is that they are basically there to ensure the original events of the game play out like how the original game played out. And to me, that is such a compelling, meta, brilliant way to address this remake, because now you can give the fans your fan service and hit those pivotal classic moments that they want to see reimagined with modern graphics and everything. But at the same time, you don't have that stagnation of, I know exactly what's going to happen next. Because I am so happy that I am 29 years old. It is 2020. And I can say, I'm not sure what's going to happen next in this game as I'm playing a Final Fantasy VII Remake. I thought that was so cool. And the Whispers aren't always just fighting you. Sometimes they'll do something that assists you, because they're not for you or against you. They're for Destiny, and they want to keep Destiny in mind. I want certain big things to change. I do want to see certain things play out differently. Even
that
something.
No. That thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing. You want
thing.
To take out one of the most crucial parts of the game because it's one of the only things I know.
Yes, we want that gone.
I want that gone. Oh, here's what I'll say. I want it gone. I'm willing to accept that happening in a different way because it's inevitable, but I just don't want it to happen that way again. The way, if it happens, I want the person, place, or thing involved with that happening to have more autonomy over that choice.
As someone who doesn't actually know how the thing happens,
you want it to happen?
I want it to happen, but I don't necessarily, as a newcomer, I don't necessarily want it to happen the way that it happens in the original game. I want a way that it's going to happen for the remake. and the reimagined and like more fleshed out world that they've created. So I want the thing to happen, and I'm sorry, I know that hurts you guys. I like to feel sad.
Thing is though, what I'm scared about is if it doesn't happen, the popular rumor right now is that it's going to happen to someone, something, or someplace else. And I think you all know who the substitute would most likely be. And I don't want that to happen either.
That was what I was speculating when I was playing the game. And I was like, wow, this changes a lot of things, because I played this when I was little. And I have grown up with this knowledge that this is how this story goes. And you know what? Fate can just chuck itself in a trash can and wheel itself to the curb. I'm good without. I'm really good without. Like, I like the idea that this is not Cloud and Tifa and Aerith and Barrett from game one. I like that this is, there's the idea, they never fully cleared up that this has happened, that there's a multiverse thing going on here with the Whispers trying to preserve an identical Final Fantasy VII across multiple timelines.
As a newcomer who doesn't understand the Whispers, which now that you've explained it, I actually appreciate the Whispers a lot more, but as someone who didn't know why the Whispers were there, I was just kind of like, what is happening with these? So I feel like, I don't know, to just like completely change the game and not have that thing happen or have it happen to someone else feels weird, especially because the Whispers don't mean anything to me right now.
That's fair.
They're not changing a course of history that I know. They're just helping draw out the course of history that I know right now. I don't really know how to explain it, but it would feel weird to me if they completely changed it.
Well, we'll have to get into it when we get to the ending, and talk about the ending, because there's a big couple things there that have to do with what you're saying.
We're basically there. We can talk about the ending.
Okay.
We already did our hand wavies.
All right, so big thing, and I'll find it interesting. It's so fascinating because a lot of people, the original teaser trailer, it was at E3 2015 when Final Fantasy VII Remake was first announced. We did not realize that first teaser, they're saying the promise has finally been made. They are coming back. Some might be afraid, some will welcome it, but we must embrace whatever change might come. We had, people thought they were just in an ominous way saying the remake's happening. Cool. Some people might not be happy with new gameplay graphics, but no, they were telling us way back then, this is going to be different. And a lot of people pointed out that remake has two meanings. One, being a remake of Final Fantasy VII. Two, being a remake of their destiny and their story. You are remaking the story of Final Fantasy VII genuinely. It's not just a retelling, you're genuinely remaking that. And the biggest difference, I think, that we see in this game is that one of those final ending shots, the screen pans out and you see a very familiar setting from Final Fantasy VII and Crisis Core that came out in the PSP. And who comes back but my favorite character, period, in all of Final Fantasy VII, Zack. Zack is there, and the big thing, and
Cloud,
we have to go over
black
this.
Hair.
Well, Cloud with black hair. And Zack survives his encounter. Zack is alive, and he sees the Whispers in Midgar. So the question is that a multiverse? Are they going to somehow intersect?
So Stacy's doing a what is that face?
So I didn't think of it as happening at the same time. I thought it was something in the past.
So they defeat the Whispers. That's our ending spoiler, is the plot of the game is not defeating Sephiroth, it's defeating the Whispers. So the implication there is that there's no one driving the Fate bus anymore. So whatever that means for that last sequence of the game, it's interesting because this means that game one is the only true remake of the Final Fantasy VII trilogy. It's starting now. Because from now on, we've derailed the Fate bus. What happens next?
Now, do we want to discuss...
I was just saying this game is hitting so differently listening to you guys talking about how it's changing from the original.
Because you said the ending was disappointing as a newcomer. Like you're trucking along, you're taking out Shinra, you're fighting some Sephiroth, and then you get to fight a bunch of ghosts.
I don't think the game was necessarily, like, the ending was disappointing. I felt very satisfied with the ending, but it wasn't what I thought because the big bad guy was a I don't even remember what the big battle was at the end.
It was the giant Whisper of Fate, the Arbiter of Fate.
And
Oh,
three little ones.
I didn't even know that was the end battle.
Well, that was
Yeah.
it's technically the second to last end battle, because then you do fight Sephiroth. Although it's not really
anticlimactic.
Sephiroth.
But it's
a
anticlimactic,
manifestation.
you're right.
Oh yeah. Did you all want me to discuss something that's a bit meta, like what the game designers have said? It's not a spoiler per se. It's
I'm good
just
with
so
that
you
if
have.
it's game designers. What do you think?
As long
Yes,
as it
Stacy.
doesn't spoil like things for me
Game
in the
2?
next 2 or 3 remakes, then I'm
No, it's just general concepts. But the main writer of the game has already come out and said that the sequels are not going to divert insanely. You're still going to hit a lot of your pivotal points. And I think that ties into the Destiny thing again, that even with the Whispers gone, naturally they're going to go down a slightly similar path. There will be differences. I'm sure there'll be differences. But now they can play up our expectations. I think that's the most fun part. We won't know what's happening.
Some stuff's going to be the same and some will be different.
Yeah,
Some will
absolutely.
just be new for all of
And,
us the whole time.
It's interesting because Final Fantasy VII really dives into a lot of philosophy with like religion and different beliefs like that. And the whole thing with the end there, where you fight Sephiroth, and it apparently wasn't exactly Sephiroth again; it was a manifestation. The life stream, Mako, where it originates within the planet, it's kind of its own like separate entity, much like time and space are. It's kind of its own presence, which seems to be separate from time and space. So I'm curious. So there's a theory that the Sephiroth we're seeing, who's interacting with us, is actually a Sephiroth after the events of Advent Children.
Oh, that'd be intriguing. Okay.
So basically, all the events have played out already. Advent Children, everything. And it's interesting because when Red 13 has his flash forward, he sees the ending sequence from Advent Children. And
I was so confused because the only thing I knew, I was like, Red, and it's the beginning. That was my knowledge of Red going into this. Sorry,
I love Red.
I needed to throw that out.
Oh, no, you're right. Red's a great character, by the way. But a lot of people think that this is a Sephiroth who's been through all of it, even the events of Advent Children. And now Sephiroth's like, well, I don't want it to play out that way again. And basically, because Sephiroth is so
pulling
evil,
some puppets.
Yeah, like his energy basically somehow escaped the live stream, is doing things again. And I like that theory. I like it that he is such an evil force that he just can't be kept down for now.
I think my favorite part of this entire ending, in fact, isn't even what happens next. It's how much everybody is now wondering about what happens next. Because it's not just, look, this is a game from 1997. Please, if you're wondering what happens, go play it again and find out. No, now we're all like, well, but did you keep my favorite part and my least favorite part? Do I get to race the chocobos?
I want to race chocobos. I love them.
You don't want to race chocobos.
That fat chocobo. Summon was my favorite, and I used it so much, even though it didn't help as much as I wanted it to. Just the fat chocobo was like, ah.
Precious.
I want my gold chocobo, and I want to get my Knights of the Round. I need Knights of the Round, and I want to see my 2-minute long summon sequence.
But we're running low on time. Sadly, we got like just a couple minutes to wrap this up. So as we leave, anything else we want to comment on before we go? I know that we wanted to talk a little bit about relevance and a little bit about wall market. So we can go hop really fast. Or we can give blanket fast summaries. What do people want to do?
I want someone else to start.
Sure. So relevance with modern issues and modern things happening in the world. And let's not say modern issues, let's just say modern themes and things that society is dealing with as a whole. I feel that Remake touched on a lot of these very well. And one of these we mentioned earlier in previous conversations. So let's go to the famous scene in Wall Market where we get one of the greatest dance-offs in the history of gaming.
It's true.
One
Top
thing
10.
I thought was, oh yeah, absolutely. So one thing I found fantastic here is you have Cloud, who throughout the whole game is showing an apprehension to anything new, anything extravagant, but purely for that sake. Like Cloud's afraid, he doesn't know how to give a high five. He doesn't know how to joke with people. It's like, it's a flat rule for him with all new things. So you see him, and he gets in this dance sequence with Andrea. And, you know, how would you describe, Elizabeth, how would you describe Andrea's general appeal, his apparel, his style?
I believe you were the one who wanted to say super gay this video, though, Brandon.
Yes, I can say it. Yes, thank you. Yay! All right, you make me so happy. So yeah, super gay.
There you go.
They're you know, and they play it up. You know, they're not hiding the fact or anything. The whole dance studio and the Honeybee Inn, you know, they're playing it up and they're not hiding it. A lot of people were worried how they were going to handle these sequences and certain others when they brought the remake, and instead they go right into it. And one of my favorite moments that I think is so wonderful to see, and just, it's these subtle little things that, unless you're someone who, I guess really, if you're not somebody who's either been through those trials in life or have been friends and close to people and love people who have been through those trials, that you might not appreciate this as much. But I think, you know, people like us, we can notice this. When Andrea, like, you know, finishes a dance and he has Cloud there, and, like, you know, it's like that kind of seductive, sultry look, like the kiss. Cloud doesn't look entirely uncomfortable. Cloud just, like, you know, it's just like, okay, is the dance over? But he doesn't, like, push away or say, oh, you freak or anything. He's just like, okay. And I think it's so nice to see the strong, silent character who's off put by all these other things. Like, this isn't, he's like, oh, well, why would I care about that? Like, he pays no mind to it. And I think that is such a lovely way to handle it. It's just, why would it bother him? You know, it's not, I don't care. All these loud sounds I don't like, but same thing when Cloud interacts with the people within the gym, when Cloud interacts with Jules, who I think the consensus among three of us is a character that we've agreed is non-gendered.
Yeah.
Or at least it's our perspective. Again,
I read Jules as non-binary. That's correct. Yeah.
Every time Cloud speaks with, you know, any of them, Andrea, Jules, in fact, he's actually kind of more open and polite with them. He almost seems more comfortable, especially with Andrea. The conversations are very respectful between the both of them. And it's just nice seeing that they just portray these characters as people living their life, you know? Like, they don't downplay their lifestyle, but it's not the only thing about them either. And I think that's cool. I think that is so, so cool.
Well, more than that, they situate this entire dance in the middle of a Be Proud of Who You Are song, right? So I don't think that would be necessarily out of place at a Pride Parade, the song that they play during this. There's a quote that Andrea says at the end of the sequence that says, "True beauty knows no gender, never feel ashamed of anything, Cloud," basically. And so, of course, as the viewer, we're encountering this situation where Cloud, this was not Cloud's original intention. Cloud is going through this quest for the purpose of an ulterior motive, right? And this probably was not his way that he envisioned any of this happening, which is, I think, a little bit of a loss from the previous game. It gave you a little bit more control about exactly how fancy Cloud was going to get. But I am pretty sure that every single gamer who played the sequence clicked picture button at the end of the dance, because there's confetti and there's like hands thrown wide in celebration, and there's like just these gorgeous stage lights, you know, feathers and flair. It is very much this exuberant portrayal, and it's fun and it's nice. So I wish Cloud himself had been a little more in control of exactly how much he participated, but as the player, I enjoyed being in control of how much I got to participate in the sequence. So
like Brandon's opinion of Cloud in Wall Market, and like him dancing with Andy, and then just being like, dancing is awkward, and not like, this is awkward.
But he's very good at dancing if you have good agility. Yes.
Which, yeah, no, I nailed that sequence. I played a lot of American Idol as a kid.
I replayed it until I nailed the sequence. Yes, go on ahead.
I replayed the pull-up challenge for like 3 days in a row before I beat that. So,
yeah, that too. Highly addictive mini games to look forward to.
Just as someone who identifies as LGBTQ, like, it was nice to see representation that wasn't like in your face, because it kind of was, but it was subtle. I don't know how to explain it. No one was like this weird character. Like, everyone was just normal people doing what they want, and everyone treated them like normal people doing what they want. So it was kind of cool to see.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
I could have stood for a few more weird characters personally, but that's okay. You know.
Mostly I'm thinking that
I'm glad none of them were portrayed with hate. As a queer person, I'm glad none of them were portrayed with hate. I am very on board that boat.
LGBTQ characters are more often than not represented as villains in media of every kind, so it was...
And Andrea's my favorite person in all of Walmart, so what are you gonna do?
Definitely not the villain. He is a good guy. Everyone is good people. Like, it was just refreshing to not to be villainized because you're different.
Definitely. It's fun. Happy Pride, y'all.
From a Japanese RPG at that, you know? It's just, it was refreshing to see. We mentioned Barrett earlier too, so I think we covered that well. Only other thing too is just to delve a little more into it, again, with the eco-terrorism and the concept of a large, powerful corporation or large, powerful entity holding people under its thumb via a resource that it knows the people needs, and then, you know, manipulating people through media and lies and things like that. We see that in today's
that
day
they're
and
not
age.
the aggressors, that the people themselves are,
Yeah, they bring a lot of these relevant questions that are more relevant now, I feel like, than even when the game first originally came out. And same thing, anytime I watch a Batman anything where it has Poison Ivy or a Ra's al Ghul, I was like, I can't hate them completely. Like, I don't like how far they go with things, but anyone who wants to protect the planet, I can dig that. And so, you know, I get it, because you ask yourselves that in the real life. Like, everyone wants to, you know, people with good hearts, I want to say, want to protect the planet and want it to be here for children in the future. But at the same time, are those people willing? Okay, are you willing to turn off your air conditioning during the summer more often and, you know, put out less pollutants? Are you willing to stop using your hairspray? Are you willing to do this? And I think it's nice for the game to look at the gravity of these things and realize you can earnestly want to do things, but are you willing to pay the price to achieve those things? And I think you said something similar to that earlier in the video.
Price of freedom.
It is steep.
It is steep. And it's interesting too that it ties it into, okay, there are the guards at the gate with the monsters inside, but who goes in and takes care of the monsters? Who protects the people? That the activism has to be rooted not just in these broader ideals or these catchy slogans. It has to be rooted in day-to-day on the ground work as well.
You know what our final question before we go truly has to be, right?
Do we recommend the game?
Well, that too. But I think we have to ask the original question, the very first question that gamers first argued about back in the wee days of Final Fantasy VII.
Oh no, are we doing this? Oh no. Okay, go.
Best girl, Aerith or Tifa? We could throw Jessie in the bunch now, but I want to stick to the OGs.
I knew you were going to ask. I've been quietly deliberating over this for weeks. I've just been like sleeping and waking and sleeping and going, well, but which one? And it's tough. Okay.
Well, mine is not tough. I love Tifa. I said that very early. I was like, Tifa. And then you were like, Aerith. And I was like,
it's
but
cheating
I do really
to say
love
Aerith, Tifa, right?
I would want Aerith as a best friend, but I would want Tifa as my significant other. I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but that's how I feel.
And Brandon, you're the reverse, right?
Yeah, I can't lie. I adore Tifa. I do. Tifa is so... That was a tough choice for me as a kid. It's even harder now with these excellent modern day characterizations. But I don't know. I just, something about Aerith, Tifa, I mean, she's so kind and sweet as well, but Aerith is just like this ray of hope and, you know, in this dark, depressing world, and just something about her general sweetness and being able to blow past Cloud's gruffness and Cloud not knowing how to handle things. And Aerith just keeps going. She knows how to crack at that shell. And somebody who is so good at that, I don't know. It's so sweet to me. I appreciate it. Team Aerith.
Seeing the true answer is Aerith with Tifa. This is the truest answer. I'm sorry. Like I've tried and I've slept on it, and like I am not going to pick whichever one is best for Cloud. I am just going to look at them and look at them just holding each other's hands so sweetly in the sewers.
Holding
And go,
each
there we
other's
go.
hands.
They
Dude, I was
belong
dying.
together. And there we
Yes.
go. That's it's not gonna
Like-
happen, but that's what I'm watching for in the remake.
Hey, you know what?
However
got
you
my
read
vote.
into that, whether you're reading into it as just like friends or more, like that was just a sweet moment. I was so stoked every time they were together and I got to play them together.
They're
A+,
going
I
shopping
support
together. It's a date.
Uh,
All right.
All right, thank you all for
Recommendations,
tuning in. I think we all can give the game 2 thumbs up. And for all of you who are watching for spoilers, here's your thumbs up that it's safe to come back and check us out again. Some blurry thumbs up from Brandon. And thank you so much for tuning in. It was delightful. Thank you guys for talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake with me. It was fun.
yes, it was very fun.
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Aurora Public Library. Please look forward to our next story time on Monday. Monday story time. Gonna be some good times. Be sure to be there. And Brandon, are you running next Monday? Or someone else?
Yep. Monday's story time will be about growing up. So I'll be there talking about growing up.
Be sure to check it out. We got some cool stuff coming up. Thanks so much, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.